A very good evening. Time for the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front of Saturday's papers. And to check out the headlines tonight with me, political commentator Benedict Spence and the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Great to see you both. Let's have a look then at some of those front pages, beginning with the Times, which leads with America's warning to Ukraine's President Zelensky that letting Russia keep the land it currently holds after the invasion is the only choice if there is to be peace. The Telegraph says the Home Office is contacting landlords to try to rent houses for asylum seekers after a surge in migrants crossing the Channel in small boats. While The Guardian reports that the EU is planning to ease its post-Brexit rules and allow young people to travel and work freely. Well, amid America's tussle with China over tariffs, the FT reports that all iPhones being shipped to the US will now be manufactured in India instead. With word of a 13% increase in train cancellations over the past year, the Eye keeps track of the worst performing rail services. Let's bring in the Mirror. British tourists are being warned to expect a hostile reception from locals on the continent who are upset at the number of tourists. While the Mail speaks to presenter Gregg Wallace about the allegations of inappropriate behaviour against him, which he has always denied. The Sun says the Gallagher brothers have started playing together again ahead of their much-awaited new Oasis tour, although the neighbours have been moaning about the noise. While the Express predicts temperatures of 27 degrees next week, which might be why £50 million is being spent on a project to see if it's possible to switch off the sun. That's according to The Star. And I'm joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Susie Boniface. So, lots to discuss, both of you. We're going to start with the Times and this land deal. Land deal is only choice, US warns Zelensky. We heard the President speaking on Air Force One just a moment ago, saying that that meeting between the US envoy and President Putin went well.
Yeah,
Benedict.
It went very well, I suppose, if you're President Putin. It seems to be that he's going to get much of what he wants. Not everything, of course. Donald Trump has to be seen to be able to get a win. But I think in practical terms, this was always likely to be what was put on the table. Ukraine, partly because its allies simply didn't move fast enough to equip it, or when they did equip it, to allow it to use the weapons in the way that they were designed to be used, has bled soldiers on the battlefield and bled a lot of resources. Any possibilities of a counter-attack, we saw the last counter-offensive didn't go particularly well. I think that window has very much gone, and it's just going to sort of stay as a war of attrition if the war continues, which suits Russia. Even though Russia loses huge amounts of men, it simply already has the numbers. So I think that this was, if a deal was going to be forced on any side, it was going to be one that was going to be forced on Ukraine, saying, look, let them keep the territory that they already have. They'll give up claims on other things, and that might be the best you can hope for. What message does that send? It's not a very good one, ultimately. If you're not already in NATO, if you're not a nuclear power, if you've got a menacing neighbour on your doorstep, if you're not at the top of the US's list of defence priorities, it's particularly worrying, I would have thought. But I'm not surprised that this is what is going to be put forward, and ultimately Russia is able to dictate a lot of the terms on this because the US has been so keen to say, look, we want to get a deal done, we want to get it done quickly. Russia can kind of sit there and go, well, we can draw this out for as long as we want because, you guys really dropped the ball earlier. So we are just salami slicing more territory over time. So you're going to have to give us what we want. So ultimately, I fear that that is going to be what is forced on the Ukrainians. Europe hasn't rearmed anywhere near fast enough. It's not like it's had 3 years to prepare or come to some sort of agreement on what European defence looks like. This is the fate of Ukraine.
I mean, Susie, at the moment, this deal looks like a sort of a wish list from President Putin, doesn't it? And tonight we've had Trump saying in Time magazine, Crimea will stay with Russia, while Zelensky says only the Ukrainian people have the right to decide which territories are Ukrainian. I mean, how can this be resolved?
It's not a deal. A deal is when two parties agree to give and take something. And what's happened here is that Russia has invaded, decided to take some stuff, and then America has become part of the Russian offensive. Ukraine has done amazingly over the past 3 years. It's by no means been disastrous. Russia was supposed to take over the country in about 3 days flat, and after 3 years are still grinding away in the east. Very recently, they've been having some successful offensives against supply lines and so on, and cost Russia an awful lot of lives, which has maybe lost about 1 million people. But Benedict's right, they do have more that they can throw at it. But the fact is that whatever is being agreed by Witkoff and Putin in Moscow, and whatever Zelensky does or does not eventually have to agree to, this is temporary. This is just now. It's just a way of having a pause, which is long enough for Russia to take a deep breath and start invading somewhere else, or to take over the rest of Ukraine. Meanwhile, everyone in Ukraine is going to be fighting against whatever bit of Russia is left there in the land that's been annexed. And all the people who live in that area, who may well wish to be Ukrainian or Russian, will be fighting each other. There will be a massive civil problem and insurgency in that area for years to come. It's not that this is the solution, that whatever, if there is ever a deal, if Putin, and to have that deal anyway, Putin has to listen to Trump and stop firing things at Ukraine, and that hasn't happened either. So there's no chance of getting around the table until there is a reasonable ceasefire. Europe is starting to pull itself together a bit, but I'm sure we'll get on as not necessarily doing very well. But this is it's just Trump saying stuff, and it's Putin saying stuff. But what's actually happening, what's actually being done on the ground, is Russia's still bombing stuff and Ukraine's still fighting. And even if you manage to sign some kind of an agreement that Trump's brokered, that's not got you peace. It's got you a delayed, slightly longer war, which is going to be worse.
OK, well, let's move on to that European angle and the British angle, because in the Mirror, Benedict, the Prime Minister fears sending in our troops is simply too risky.
It is too risky, partly because we simply don't have the numbers, and those that we do have don't have the equipment, because we haven't really kept up to date with most things in this country. And I know that it's easy to look at things like the NHS or education, because those are frontline things that you see and interact with on an almost daily basis. The situation in the armed forces, boy, is it bad. You only need to look at the operational state of much of the Royal Navy or our Trident nuclear submarines to see that things are falling apart pretty quickly. And that's even before you get onto the subject of, do you physically have the manpower to put together battalions to actually be able to staff the ships. We had the very embarrassing situation last year during the Iranian strike on Israel, where actually British aircraft couldn't take part in the defence of Israel against certain ballistic missiles because we don't have the right equipment either. So why it is that there is any suggestion that Britain can physically do this without really, I mean, turbocharging the amount of money that is put in, but not just the amount of money that's put in. Actually, the huge amount of waste that goes on in the MOD is also a major problem that, again, isn't being looked at, because if you give the MOD XYZ amount of money for new tank systems or whatever it is, they'll find a way of wasting it as well. Britain is not really very serious about this. France is the only other partner that has been talking seriously about it, and it has had to pull back from the Sahel because it doesn't have the capacity to do these things. The only other countries that are sort of taking their defence seriously at the moment, Italy has absolutely no intention of putting troops into Ukraine. Poland has massively rowed back as the Trump administration has put the screws on them as well. You're kind of looking around and saying, well, who is this coalition of the willing? There are lots of countries that are thinking, yes, in principle, we'd like to, but they don't have the manpower. The rearmament of Europe is coming far too slowly. And as we've seen, over the arguments over the EU Defence Fund, there's a lot of, disagreement over actually what the money is meant to go on or who gets those contracts. OK. Listen, I just want to squeeze one more story in before we go to the break. We're delayed slightly because of President Trump's comments. But in the Express, reflecting the meeting today in Washington between Rachel Reeves and Scott Bessent, the headline, Reeves suggests EU trade more vital than US. Hours before Washington talks.
It is. I mean, she's just talking the truth, right? 50% of our imports and exports, roughly, are European, right? And they're less than 30 miles away. America, that's 4,000 miles away and has loads of stuff that we don't want because their cars don't fit on our roads and they guzzle too much gas and they can't turn corners and they've got this awful chlorine and hormone-injected beef and goodness knows what else, and a terrible health system. We don't want any of that over here, thank you very much. Of course we don't want their stuff. I think it's about 16% of our exports go over there, and it's about 10%. Oh, it's the other way around. It's about 10% and 16% that we deal with the US, and it's 50% with the EU. Of course, she's just talking the truth. She's allowed... The idea that our Chancellor can be criticised for saying the truth before having a sit-down with someone who is working for a government that appears to exist in cloud cuckoo land is just another sign of how terrible our media's become. But that's a bad thing.
We're going to go to a break. We'll discuss this more in the next hour. I'm sure, Benedict, give you a chance to talk about that as well. Coming up, why British tourists could be getting a hostile reception on the continent this summer. Discussing that and more in a couple of minutes.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict. There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it. This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board. So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board. This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first. Help is slowly reaching these places. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. This is a picture of destruction. Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
Benedict and Susie still with us. Benedict, front page of the Mirror. I mean, this is quite a headline, isn't it? Make tourists fear us.
Yes. I mean, especially coming off the back of Rachel Reeves being so nice to say, actually, EU trade is the most important thing. And all of these Europeans, they don't want us to come over here and do any trade. That seems rather rotten of them. But, OK, so this is the SET European Network Against Touristification, which I'm almost certain will have been either Spanish or Italian, Turistificazione, and would have sounded much better when you put it that way. They're unhappy with the number of people that are coming to certain parts of Europe, which, to be fair, were places that were never designed to have huge amounts of tourists, places like the Amalfi Coast and Capri. This is leading to massive rents, you know, an inability to operate during the summer months, and there is a desire to see far fewer of these people. And it's not just to do with tourists, actually. Another thing that we've seen increasing is protests against people like digital nomads. You see that in cities like Lisbon and also Genoa and Valencia, where, again, locals are being squeezed out by people who come and they rent out Airbnbs and then they just never leave. So this is becoming a bit of a problem in very desirable European spots. But you've also got to juxtapose that with the fact that there are great swathes of southern Europe which are being completely decimated by fertility rates plummeting and people moving away. So you have a very strange sort of situation where you have some parts of Europe massively overcrowded during the summer months and you have other places that are completely dead. But there's another side to this. There's a story actually in the Times, which we weren't supposed to talk about, but I noticed, which is that apparently there's going to be a tourist tax put on people who visit Liverpool from this summer. So there might be the solution, you know, go for the Scouse approach of just taxing people who come to stay for the weekend.
I'm sure there's a suitable Beatles song. I'll have a think of it for, for the next hour.
I think there's been tourist tax on a lot of those places for a while, but, you know, the idea... If you didn't have a tourism industry, what would be there instead? Many of our own sort of coastal towns and cities had big problems with tourists at one point and now find there are no tourists coming and find that they have huge problems as a result. So you've got to have a happy balance.
Susie, let's finish with this splash on the front of the Daily Mail. Gregg Wallace has been speaking to them.
Speaking of happy balance, we haven't got any here. So this is the TV presenter Gregg Wallace, who was accused of making a variety of sexual remarks to and behaving in an unpleasant way when he was working on MasterChef and other programmes, and who could have survived all that professionally had he just said sorry. And then he came out with a video blaming women, middle-class women of a certain age, for getting their knickers in a twist, fundamentally. And as a result of that, because he just looked like he had not got the memo, he lost all his work. Now, he's come out 6 months later and saying, oh, I feel really bad. I feel so awful. I felt suicidal. It's been really grim being me. No one deserves this. Everyone thinks that it's just awful. And again, he still hasn't got the memo that it's not about him. It's about the people who felt oppressed and victimised and had really awkward and embarrassed because of the things he was saying to them at work. Yeah. And he actually has the nerve to say that he was slow to wake up to the changing nature of the work environment. Now, I'm not sure at what point in history it was ever OK for a senior male figure to be walking around doing the things that Gregg Wallace was accused of doing.
We're going to have to... sorry, Susie, to cut you off. We're going to have to leave it there. We are out of time. We're just going to have a quick look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Yeah, the headline is that the weekend will be dry for many and it's set to turn much warmer next week. However, there is some rain around. It'll be a wet start to Saturday for RSC coasts and much of western Britain, thanks to a band of cloud and showery rain. But elsewhere, it will be mostly dry with some mist and fog patches. The zone of cloud and increasing patchy rain will edge very slowly eastwards across Scotland, Wales and western England through the day with brighter skies to either side. It'll feel fairly warm in the sunshine with light winds.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Coming up at 11, Donald Trump arrives in Rome as he joins dozens of world leaders.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.